Hi, and welcome to our virtual speaker series for 2020. Behind me is the beautiful Capitol Theatre. It was designed by Walter Burley Griffin and Marion Mahoney Griffin in the 1920s and is considered one of Australia's great architectural treasures. I'm just going to provide you a brief introduction to our 5 speakers today, and then I'll also discuss one of my favourite buildings in Melbourne. Before I do so, I'd just like to make an acknowledgement of country. Our programming exists on what always was and always will be the land of the people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the wider Melbourne community and beyond. Indigenous sovereignty has never been ceded in Australia, and we try to be mindful of that in everything we do, given our particular focus on the modern built environment. Today's speaker series is brought to you by the Architects Registration Board of Victoria, or the ARBV. They have supported this project since its very inception in 2009, and I'd like to sincerely thank them for their ongoing support of us. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank our other sponsors for our program, both large and small, and in particular, the City of Melbourne. So the speaker series, what is it? It's an opportunity for you to hear directly from some of our great design professionals here in Melbourne. They're going to discuss their project, which is constructed. So you get the opportunity to go and see it after hearing their presentation and understand it from a design lens. They'll explain why it is the way it is. They will also then, at the end of their presentation, discuss what their favourite building is by another architect. This is no easy task, and they'd all have numerous architects they could choose from, but we've only allowed them to choose one. The reason this is important is it gives you an insight into what buildings other architects value. And over the last 10 years, we've collected this data, and it's fascinating to see a number of buildings which keep coming to the top of that list. And what this illustrates is that good design transcends time, transcends style, fashion. And this is really important in terms of any of our projects that we deliver today, thinking about this idea of longevity and value to society. This is the list of the 5 speakers we have for you this year, and I'll just go through very briefly and introduce each one of them. Ruth Wilson is a principal and studio leader from Architectus. She has over 30 years experience in Europe and Australia, and is also on the board of 10 Women, a group that empowers women in the construction industry. She'll be talking about the State Library redevelopment. Now, the State Library is one of the most significant buildings in Victoria and was one of the first free public libraries in the world. A fantastic project which allowed the citizens of Melbourne to gain knowledge for free. Jeffery Copolov is a director of Bates Smart. Bates Smart have a history of over 165 years of continuous practice in Australia, and Jeff was was indeed the first interior design director of the practice. He's a gold medal winner, and he's going to be speaking about the Victoria Racing Club stand. This is a really fascinating project in the sense that it re-envisages this typology. Instead of being a single-fronted grandstand that we're traditionally used to, it actually sees the grandstand in the hole and in the round. Anne-Marie Treweeke from Lovell Chen will discuss the Old Melbourne Quad redevelopment, a really significant project in the sense that it integrates passive house principles or sustainability principles with the refurbishment and redevelopment of the Old Melbourne Quad. This type of process has incredible significance to society in the sense that our heritage fabric is really important to us culturally, but it needs to be upgraded to ensure that it reduces our carbon footprint. And this project illustrates a way that this could be done through passive house principles. Adrian Stanic has over 25 years experience with Lyons, has won numerous awards for their company throughout this time. He's going to be talking about Prahran Square, which is a fascinating project about a public square which utilises topography to create place, but also interface with streetscapes on all of its frontages. And last but not least, Melissa Bright from Studio Bright will talk about the Ruckers Hill house. Her studio has been slowly growing since its inception in 2006 and has done some delightful projects over this time, and this is certainly one of them. So I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about one of my favourite buildings in Melbourne, the State Government Offices by Young and Freeman. It was designed in 1962 and completed in 1970. The design director was Barry Patton, and it's a fascinating project in terms of this idea of doing a contemporary insertion into a heritage framework and how you can create context through being sympathetic to your surrounding environment. So the design competition that was put forward in 1962 spoke about having the tall tower at the end of the Collins Street axis. Now, at the end of the axis currently is the old Treasury building you can see in this image. It was designed by J.J. Clark when he was at the tender age of just 19 and was built in the 1850s. What Young and Freeman did in their competition entry was to actually move the tower to the north, which you can see here on the left of this slide, so that the heritage building maintained its pride of place at the end of the axis of Collins Street. So if we move around to the north, you can understand their design approach. They've actually put forward three buildings, a lower slung building which matches the height of the Treasury building to the right, the taller administrative building in the centre, and then the low slung chemicals laboratory building to the left. It has a slightly different precast facade to the others, but together their shape and configuration talk to the city in a variety of different ways, and that's what I wanted to discuss with you today. So to the south, the frontage onto the park, you see the consistent parapet line that runs through with the insertion of the new building. It ties together Old Treasury to the left to the other government buildings of the Treasury precinct to the right. And this frontage and the lines that run through, picking up cornice details and so on, really ties together the whole ensemble into one precinct. One of the most, I think, exciting parts of this project is one that isn't often experienced. If you walk out of the taller building, which is to my right, there's an in-between space. And this in-between space lines up exactly on axis with Alperson House. Now, Alperson House was designed by A.K. Henderson in the 1930s and was one of the first medium density housing developments in the city. It's an E-shaped plan and of incredible architectural significance to the city. What I find fascinating is the whole composition of the Young and Freeman project responds back to that building. And what it does is it actually brings the power of the A.K. Henderson building back into this site and leverages off that. At the same time, to the left, you'll see the portal frames of the precast facade and the shadow play that happens through that marries into the J.J. Clark Old Treasury building, which has the rustication and the beautiful detailed cornice lines, which are much more ornate, but nevertheless the two play off one another. So this is a building that's using its context and bringing it back in. This is another view from the south. And what you see here is the parapet lines shooting through the taller form of the office administrative building in the background. What I love about this shot is the bird's mouth detail that the taller tower has and also runs across the parapet of that as well. So again, the crafting of the form to create shadow, detail and texture, and how it also then references back to the heritage buildings that surround it. And then finally, in terms of coloration, the sandstone of the Treasury building is then picked up with the reinforced concrete facade of the Young and Freeman project. Now, the Young and Freeman project with its facade was one of the first load-bearing precast facades in Victoria at the time. So it was incredibly innovative. And so for me, that's one of the great things about this project is it talks about how you can have contemporary architecture with design innovation, which ties into the heritage context. It makes sense of the city, it enhances the city, and I think makes a better outcome for all. And this is something that Roy Simpson, one of the directors of Young and Freeman, speaks about in his gold medal address in 1997, the year that he dies. He speaks about the idea that architects should consider doing background buildings, the idea of doing contextual work. And the idea behind that is to allow for the significant few to be seen as great architectural elements in their own right. But this idea of creating city and precinct as being of primary importance in terms of how we construct our built environment. And that's why I think I love this project so much, is this idea of it contributing back to the city. So that's enough from me. I hope you enjoy our fantastic lineup of speakers, and thanks so much for joining us. Keep well, all the very best. Cheers.
Thanks very much to Open House Melbourne for having me. I'm really delighted to present our Ruckers Hill house to you today. It's an alterations and addition project in Northcote, up on the crest of Ruckers Hill. On a corner site with north up the page, we love these tricky sites and see them as an opportunity to think about the role of the private house in the broader site context. The existing Edwardian holds its position at the front of the site. But down the side street, there was an 80s addition that attempted to emulate the period home, but we think it actually just diluted it. With no relationship to the backyard, and with the garage receiving the only bit of sunlight available. You can see here the existing kitchen and the hallway, and that was really the connection to the backyard. On the side street though, there was a mix of old corrugated fences and sheds that have inspired some of the materiality of the project. So this is the existing condition. You can see the rear addition and the existing garage highlighted in light grey. These were removed and a new volume was imagined for the rear of the site to ensure north sunlight to the new living spaces and garden, with a link connecting it to the existing house and a new pool courtyard squeezed in on the side. We imagine the link more like a garden veranda or a colonnade, with the pool courtyard a little bit like a Roman bath. Arches, however, are much more fun to play in when they're upside down. The new volume at the rear is 2-storey, adjusted to be sympathetic to neighbours, and with 2 new rooftop gardens to connect to the street and provide views beyond, the upper form gently connecting to make a vertical street wall. The project becomes 2-part in its nature, one a personal retreat and the other more civically engaged with an eye on the street and the far horizon. Here in the ground floor plan, you can see bedrooms are put in the original Edwardian, and the new addition contains a series of flexible living spaces that catch the north sunlight, with the dining space here hard on the street. On the first floor plan, there's even a bar that serves the 2 rooftop decks, and a small study and a spare room that doubles as the kids' play space. So here you can see that brick form hard on the street, with the off-form concrete base made using the old corrugated sheets for formwork, complete with peeling paintwork markings. The concrete base mediates the street levels of the hill, and you can see how we imagine plants one day spilling all the way over the edge in an offering of generosity to the street. We love the proximity of street life to the internal workings of the household. The bronze screen at the dining space provides a protective veil with only small glimpses of activity within. Whereas at night, things are totally reversed. There is, of course, an internal blind to close things down when needed. From within, you can see all the street activity, and you can also see here the corrugated fences across the road. We love these veiled glimpses of life happening within, and also that transparency again back to the street. Up on the roof, the newly planted garden with the city views, rooftop garden with the city views beyond. And here from the street courtyard, you can see that despite its proximity to the street, the bronze fence planter and level change ensures it feels private and protected. Internally, spaces are small and modest. This is the kitchen here, and the dining space with a view back to the street. That timber panelling wraps around to extended living spaces where homework can be done outside of bedrooms. And then the space further wraps around to form a more protected inner lounge that doubles as a stage and as a sort of stage set for family performances, with the stair working perfectly for backstage entrances. You can see here looking down from above. The heavy green curtain helps you to hide away and listen to a record with the sounds spilling out to the family beyond. These are a series of connected yet separate spaces that respond to different family needs. You can see the relationship of the pool and the framing of the old Edwardian in the distance there. And that's the pool. And looking back to the living spaces. We love this video that has captured the pool as a calming, light reflective water body at the heart of the house, framing the stage set beyond. But it's also for fun and for kids to play, full of life and activity. This is actually really how we've imagined this space, gutsy and durable. The upside down arches, providing the perfect climbing challenge and a spot for multiple bommies. The link works as part of the garden space with layered views to the pool beyond. The glass line's been pulled away from the arches to make space for planting, further diminishing the boundary between inside and out. Light-filled swaying greenery. And of course, this is the best place for an indoor cricket pitch. And we must not forget about the kids. It's important to also talk about the extensive reworking and restoration that has taken place of the existing Edwardian house. It had been significantly altered over the years, with windows having aluminium frames and the bluestone window sills that have been pebble-creted over. Internally, most of the period detail had been removed. Even the existing hall had a tiled floor with even tiled skirting. And while the existing house did need a lot of work, it wasn't without its inspiration. These peachy pink walls being reimagined in the new main bedroom. And here the fireplace was retained with a new connection through to the ensuite bathroom. In the bathroom, custom basins that stand as furniture in period parts of the house, with architraves and cornices carefully restored. And here that was the existing lounge with its heavy curtains and plum carpet that have also inspired the plum carpet used in the main bedroom. Wardrobe joinery has been designed as furniture, with every little thing being carefully considered and detailed. This is the existing bathroom. It's been reimagined as sort of shared communal spaces for kids to negotiate, much like the schoolyard drinking trough. And colour. Each kid's bedroom gets its own identity with colour and fittings selected with the kids. Even Richmond Tigers yellow. And lastly, at the threshold of old and new is a commissioned stained glass artwork that depicts the many histories of the site. The current city view up the top, the fruit trees in the middle, remembering the Italian and Greek migrants that once settled here, and most importantly, yam daisies that acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. We'll just end on this little street video of the street condition. It's also nice to finish with a cute little dog. So that's the end of Ruckers Hill House, and I've been asked to show you also a favourite Melbourne project. I've selected the Robin Boyd's Small Homes Service. It's hard to go past Boyd when you're a Melbourne architect, and while I love Walsh Street, the Walsh Street house, the Small Homes Service had an impact well beyond one project. Through the Small Homes Service, architect-designed houses were made affordable and accessible to many, something we continue to struggle with as architects. The designs had good solar orientation and maximised living spaces. Importantly, they were also small in size and aimed to do more with less. As architects, I hope we can find the next version of the Small Homes Service, arguably not a detached single-family home, something more appropriate for today, sustainable, affordable, accessible architecture. We have some work to do. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Adrian Stanic. I'm from Lyons. I'm very pleased to be presenting Prahran Square to you as a part of the Open House Speaker Series. We won this project in a limited design competition for Stonington City Council, which we did in association with Aspect Studios Landscape Architecture. If I were to summarise the brief for the competition, it could be simply described as having three key elements. One, addressing the desperate need for outdoor open public space for the inner city suburb of Prahran. Two, providing high quality car parking with additional capacity. And three, but most importantly, designing a highly flexible multimodal space that could accommodate a whole range of activities from small scale events through to large scale events. When you look at the site pre-existing, it was actually a very large area, almost 10,000 square metres. And when you compare that to, say, Federation Square, you can see how big the site area is. In doing our critical site analysis, we observed that there are four distinctive zones surrounding the site. The first zone incorporates the market, Grattan Gardens and the community centre. The second is the zone that incorporates Commercial Road and Chapel Street. The third zone is the old civic precinct, which includes the town hall, the courthouse and the old jail. The fourth is the zone that captures Greville Street and Prahran Station. Our site analysis also showed that there were very strong diagonal pedestrian lines across the site. We also recognised that each street frontage was going to be critical to the long-term evolution and activation of each street frontage. We were very conscious that the project would eventually be a catalyst for future developments, particularly along Cato Street. Considering this, we undertook that each of the corners would be highly important, firstly in engaging the four precincts, and secondly, anchoring the pedestrian desire lines across the site. We also felt that it was important to emphasise pedestrian movement around the site, so we removed traffic from Wattle Street and Cato Streets by introducing a fully pedestrianised space in Wattle Street and a shared zone in Cato Street to enable service truck deliveries to the supermarkets. This was critical to traffic decongestion and pedestrian conflicts in these spaces. With the key structural components of the analysis defined, we determined strategic locations for the main pedestrian entry portals into the car park, which would be developed in its entirety underground. Through detailed traffic analysis, we also determined that Izzard Street would provide the best point for vehicular access into the underground car park. And we suggested a one-way diversion for the tail ends of Wattle and Cato Street. In recognition that the site was very large, we knew that it was going to be very important to create a diversity of experience across the site. So we looked at dividing the site area into 9 components comprised of the 4 corners, the street edges, and the central space. Through the design process, we were also interested in the idea of tying this project back to the history of Prahran to create a historical dialogue, albeit in an abstract way. We did this by mapping each of the landmarks surrounding the site, such as the Town Hall, the Clock Tower, Prahran Central Domes, the Market Entry and the Jam Factory Smoke Tower. We then used these landmarks to map a series of threads across the site to each point of the 9 squares to create a woven fabric. These threads created a means for shaping each of the 9 components. We liked this idea as it referenced Prahran's deep history in the craft of drapery. The result of this operation created 9 distinctive shapes for each of the 9 key spaces within Prahran Square: Market Corner, Commercial Corner, Greville Corner and Civic Corner. The lawn, the forest, the garden and the terrace, all intrinsically connected with the central square. These are 2 cross-sections through the project. Firstly, they show the 2 levels of basement car parking that stretch the extents of the site area. Secondly, they show the forest, the terrace and the lawn as spaces that are structurally inclined to face the central square. This design tactic creates a means for visual access to the streetscape, into the car park. It also provides space necessary for the entry portals, the lifts, travellators, the retail spaces, the car park entry, and various elements of plant and equipment. This slide from our competition pack shows the composition of all 9 elements within the context of Prahran. You will note that the project has a distinctive white ribbon that ties together all of the spaces and accentuates each of the corners, which, like arrowheads, point to the centre of the square. One of the other very important aspects of the project is its environmental design approach. One of the key components of this approach was the aspect of water harvesting. Water is collected from the ground level of the square and piped into treatment plant and holding tanks in the basement level for reuse in reticulation irrigation throughout the landscape areas of the project. It is worth noting that harvesting water from a ground plane rather than a roof plane requires far more rigorous systems to treat the water for reuse. One of the other important ambitions of the project was to minimise energy use. This was done by providing natural lighting into the car park where possible through the building form of the inclined structures. Also by utilising energy efficient LED lighting into the car park and throughout the external areas of the square. The lighting externally has also been designed to minimise light pollution to the surrounding areas. Also central to the environmental approach for the project was the introduction of ecological diversity through landscape planting. This was achieved through native gums and shrubs, palms and olive trees, all selected for their durability and drought resistance. This slide shows how important the corners are in drawing the surrounding precinct into the square. The in situ concrete ribbon orchestrates this movement and creates gateways into the square. The corners are spaces that make transition from their associated surrounding precinct into the square. They are all landscape spaces where the planters provide different types of casual seating opportunities for gathering, meeting or resting. Each corner has been designed with its own palette of materials that respond to each of the 4 surrounding precincts. For example, this is Commercial Corner, where the brickwork paving references the brickwork factories that once existed in Chapel Street. And this is Gravel Corner, where the granite paving is more colourful, expressive and textured. The corners also serve to create a means of clear orientation within the square. On each of the corners there is a grove of steel pipes. This is an artwork piece designed by Ramus and Material Thinking in collaboration with Lyons. The work comprises high-resolution LED screens with a 3-dimensional soundscape integrated within the pipes to create a truly unique but subtle entry and exit experience for the square. Visual and acoustic works have been specifically designed to reference Prahran and its pre-colonial ecology and Indigenous heritage. Here you see the artwork animating Commercial Corner and at this time providing a soundscape of machinery, which is a further reference to the drapery trade that once existed in Prahran. The centre of the square is the heart of the project. It is the exchange for movement and visual perspective from within inside the square. The central square provides highly flexible space with supporting services infrastructure for an extensive range of outdoor activities. Here you see the smoking ceremony conducted at the official opening of the square. The field of dots in the paving are the jet ports for a central water feature that has been turned off for this occasion. When the square is not being used for structured activities, the water feature populates the central square and engages passers-by. It also provides a focal point to the centre from the surrounding spaces, much like the hearth in a living room. The central square provides a safe, open, well-lit environment that encourages and supports diagonal pedestrian desire lines across the site. And consequently, with this intersection of pedestrian movement comes a moment for serendipity. The central square foregrounds the lawn, which is a north-facing space. The lawn is designed with real grass and populated with native gum trees, albeit very young at this stage. It is a space for structured and unstructured activities, for dog walking and play, or just chilling out and having a picnic with an elevated view of Prahran overlooking the square. The terrace to the right has been composed as a series of large urban steps formed with garden beds, seating and shading that can be used casually or for structured seating space for organised events within the square such as concerts, performances and demonstrations. As with the lawn, it provides an elevated view of the square and the surrounding context of Prahran. Across from the square is a curious sculptural play object designed for the project by Aspect Studio in collaboration with Lyons. This creature watches over the square and announces entry into the forest. The forest, named as such, as it is a space that incorporates references from Victorian native forests. This space has been composed with Victorian mudstone blocks and native gums and shrubs. A path leads people up the elevated aspect of the forest, switching from end to end. But the pathway is not the only way to engage in the forest. People are encouraged to scale the mudstone blocks or use them to sit and enjoy the space. Whereas at the top of the forest, there is a seating space for respite and also another play area that overlooks the square and commands an elevated view of central Prahran. Through all its seating opportunities, the forest provides a unique way to retreat or engage with the square. And like all of the public spaces in the square, it is being designed and lit for safety and amenity. The sensory garden sits at the southern end of the square and literally merges into the square. The garden is planted with herbaceous shrubs and cabbage palms, and the planters are fabricated from Corten rusted steel. The sensory garden is designed as a series of spaces that create small nooks nestled within the planting and fixed furniture to encourage intimate occupation. The space is shaded by operable umbrellas and fixed screen pergola to provide additional amenity to the space all year round. The sensory garden provides an on-grade perspective of the square and will support the eventual retail tenancy occupation of the space to the left of this image. This slide is a ground level plan of the project. The yellow and blue areas on the plan indicate the area that is dedicated to activation of the streetscapes. Yellow is defined as lobbies, lift areas and stairs. Blue is defined as opportunity space or retail area. In this way, the streetscapes are designed to minimise unactivated frontages. Chatham Street at the southern end of the project was expanded by extending the streetscape across the roof of the car park. This strategy also supported the principle of establishing a pedestrian link across Izzard Street into Grattan Street Gardens through a block recently purchased by the council as a pocket park. Each street edge is announced and emphasised by the concrete ribbon form. This is a streetscape view of the lofted form of the lawn floating over a stair portal into the car park. To the right is the expanded space of Chatham Street. On Wattle Street, the concrete ribbon becomes a fine floating canopy that accommodates the entry portal into the car park and the retail areas that sit adjacent to the sensory garden. At Civic Corner, the lofted form of the terrace creates transparency through to Cato Street and provides the space for which the stair from the car park rises to the street. On Cato Street, seating and planting combine to provide amelioration and amenity in the shared pedestrian zone. The perforated wall of the main plant room that supplies air to the car park is folded in orange aluminium to create additional seating to engage the street. Safety in the form of passive surveillance has been considered very carefully throughout the project. Even the amenities areas have been designed to provide passive surveillance of those spaces, looking in from the street and looking out. The amenities wash area has also been designed to be open and highly visible. The concept of passive surveillance is critical to the idea of crime prevention through environmental design, which has been implemented throughout all the spaces of the project. Here there is a visual connection provided from Commercial Corner into the car park, and this view from Greville Corner into the car park, and this from Cato Street into the stair into the car park. The vehicular entry to the car park is from Izzard Street. To the right, screened in film, is a retail area yet to be let. The car park entry has been minimised without consequence to its functional use and has been designed in subtle but effective neon light. The main entry is from Cato Street. The lobby area has been designed to be highly transparent, connecting the street with the car park. The main form of access between the ground and the basement levels is by travelator, with lifts also provided in this location. The car park has been designed to accommodate almost 500 cars over 2 levels. It has been future-proofed for potential adaptive reuse one day by creating a larger ceiling height of 3 metres at the basement level 1. This results in a grand and lofty entrance space into the car park from Cato Street. The car park has also been designed to avoid the substandard car park scenario that existed prior to this project. The columns have been spaced at a long span to enable cars to freely move within the space and the doors not to clash with columns. The articulated painting of the structural elements in the car park create a bright field of colour and energy in the car park. The wayfinding designed by FOD has been developed to register each of the main streets within the car park for means of orientation. The lift lobbies have been detailed in patterned precast panels and coloured in the project's signature blue. And all the stairs in the car park have been designed as glowing glazed beacons to create a further means of wayfinding within those spaces. In summary, Prahran Square is a unique public space type. It brings together a series of diverse experiences into one integrated piece of urban infrastructure. While it comprehensively addresses the critical need for safe, quality car parking, it purposely excludes traffic and cars from the public realm, captured within the ribbon edges. At a macro level, it stitches itself into the fabric of Prahran to facilitate new movement and new community consciousness. This is a public building and a public space that over time, as the landscape matures, it will facilitate new creative uses by the community and the Stoniton City Council. The last slide I'd like to show you is not at Prahran Square, but I think it has some interesting parallels. Federation Square replaced what was previously the gas and fuel buildings, which was widely regarded as a blight to the city edge. I feel that Federation Square was an incredibly important project in Melbourne, for not only transforming this important city corner, but also for demonstrating how we can develop the edge of the city. Whilst it challenges the formality of the city grid, it also respects it. The spaces it creates are granular as well as sparse. The arrangement of buildings and the public space is abstract as well as it is formal. Importantly, the project has created for Victorians a new way of thinking about the use and nature of public space and galvanised our collective understanding of the importance of having a space that symbolises the city's cultural heart. Thank you.
Great to be with you to take you through the transformation of the State Library Victoria, known as Vision 2020. This is a project all about unlocking possibilities. It literally unlocks spaces that have been closed to the public for decades and releases 40% more space to the public and increases seating by 70%. But more than that, it unlocks the full potential of the library to engage with more Victorians in more ways. So I'm going to take you through some of the transformed spaces and talk about what informed our thinking and our design approach. Architectus began this redevelopment in 2016. We partnered with Danish-based practice Schmidt Hammer Lassen, with whom we have recently completed Tauranga, the Christchurch City Library. Melbourne-based Andronis Conservation Architecture advised on all heritage aspects, and the wider team included Irwin Consult, now WSP, for structure and services, Stenson Farming for lighting, ARP for AV and acoustics, and ID Lab for wayfinding and signage. The project management was by Development Victoria, and the building contractor was built. The State Library is actually 23 buildings that take up a full city block. And we worked in about 70% of the ground floor, shown in blue here. And we wanted visitors to the library to be able to easily find what they might be looking for, but also to entice them on a journey to explore the whole library and maybe find some things that they weren't expecting. A key to achieving this intuitive and rewarding passage through the library was to reopen the Russell Street entry and emphasize this axial through block connection from Swanston Street to Russell Street. And a parallel pillar of our design approach was to reveal the heritage aspects of the library rather than replicating them. We were really intrigued by the 23 buildings. Each was from a different era, it had a different architectural expression, and we wanted them to be able to express their differences, but at the same time be tied together as a cohesive visitor experience. So we have some before and after shots. Here was the foyer. So as you entered from Swanston Street, you're actually confronted with a glass wall to navigate around. And then as you proceeded through, you can see the stair to the left there, known as the Westlink stair. That was actually closed for over a decade. And it made the domed reading room really hard to find, because the dome is whatever is in everyone's minds when you think of the State Library, and it's not actually on ground floor, it's on the floor above. So that was one of the things that the redevelopment helped solve, how to find the dome. This is the foyer today. Spacious, serene, uncluttered. We stripped each space back to reveal its original spatial quality. We got rid of that wall, and we reopened the stair, and I'll go through that a little bit later, how we did that. But at the moment, let's keep going straight ahead. So we're entering the quad, which is the space underneath the famous domed reading room, showing before and after. So reimagined into a digitally enabled active environment for group collaboration, paired study, or solo endeavour. And these are typical scenes throughout the library. People reading, working on laptops, meeting friends, discussing, problem solving, accessing the library's collection for research or for pure enjoyment. From the quad, there are 4 quarters, which used to be the courtyards. And to help orientation, each of these is signified by its own colour. I'm going to take you into the Ideas Quarter, which houses the entrepreneurial centre called Start Space, which is endowed by Christine Christian. Upstairs, it's a subscription-based co-working space, so for startups and entrepreneurs of any ilk. And we'll go into the Children's Quarter next, but before we do, I'll touch on the consultation process that really opened our eyes to the incredible things the State Library does around children's literacy and learning. The new Pauline Gandel Children's Quarter was co-designed by the families coming to the library's baby bounce and storytime programs before the redevelopment. And this was the river of dreams that they created. We really loved the insights we received, especially this note in red from a wise and perhaps weary parent basically begging us to let the kids run around. And this one really summed up the kids' ideas. So places to climb up, in and around, places to hide, places to discover, to read, to make things and to play. And here it is. So maybe it's a castle, or it's a tree house, or an echo spaceship. The four quarters are the intersections of almost every era of the library's development. Here to the right is the bluestone wall of the original library from 1856. And the external face of the domed reading room is on the left-hand side of this picture, dating from 1913. The space frame is an early 1990s intervention that we learned to love. And so the children's quarter is a space of discovery and delight, and also respite from the busy city, where you can run around and have lots of fun and develop a lifelong love of books. Wherever we could, we opened up views from one space to the next to entice the visitor to explore further. So let's go into what used to be called Palmer Hall. So the readings bookshop was to the right there, pushed up against the facade, really blocking the natural light from the rest of the hall. And this big bulkhead down the middle concealing some air handling ducts. It's now called Hanson Hall, after a generous bequeath by the Hanson Little Foundation, stripped back to its intended beauty, with the air handling systems, the lighting and the acoustic treatments almost invisibly integrated. And here you see up close what we call the new design line. So this is this suite of beautiful timber elements that provide our 21st century functionality. So they're a repetitive set of touch points throughout the library where you can gather information and other services. Let's head back to Russell Street. As I said, opened after many years closed. This is the space inside as it was, so a dead end, literally, and not an uplifting space to be in. And here it is today. Decluttered, the heritage elements revealed to be the heroes in the space, light and airy. We're looking at Reading's bookshop there, and it also houses a cafe. The herringbone jarrah retained and restored, and this beautiful contemporary art piece by local artist Ty Snaith on the back wall there. I'll take you through some of the other spaces. The Isabella Fraser room, which has proved endlessly adaptable for functions and special events. It's being set up for a wedding in this shot. The Victoria Gallery, which achieves international standard gallery conditions, created through the generous bequest of the John and Miriam Wiley Foundation. This photo was taken before the first exhibition, which is now open, and it's called Velvet, Iron and Ashes, and it features the ashes urn from London, as well as Ned Kelly's armour that you can see here, and some other really amazing treasures. Let's head back and have a look at the Westlink stair. So it dates from 1913 and basically is completely non-compliant with today's standards, and it was actually one of the trickiest challenges on the project. To make it safe and compliant with current standards, our approach was to let the old be old and the new be recognisable as an overlay and as a reversible insertion. So here you can see the new stone stair is literally overlaid on the old, with the edges of the old tread still visible, the shapely marble balustrade unadulterated. Let's head into the Ian Potter Queen's Hall. This is a photo of the southern wing on the day of opening in 1859, one of the first free public libraries in the world, and a real cornerstone of Redmond Barry's vision of marvellous Melbourne as an open, educated and egalitarian society. So this is what it used to look like. It was closed to the public for over 15 years. Severely water damaged, the roof lights closed in since the 1960s, and this 1970s Board of Works colour scheme. Just touching on some of the tools we use to design the project. So the hall was laser scanned. So each of these tiny dots is actually a geolocated point in space. And from this data, we can start to build our digital model, which begins very simply and then has more and more detail added to it over the course of the project until it becomes a model from which construction can begin. And this is the hall today, the Ian Potter Queen's Hall. Once again, flooded with natural light, heated and cooled for the first time. By day, it's a reading room, and at night, it's an event space for gala dinners, cocktail parties, weddings, book launches, fashion shows. Our design approach was to reveal the history of the hall, not replicate it. So through a series of archaeological paint scrapes, we revealed the original paint scheme by Edward Latrobe Bateman. And that discovery is now exposed for everyone to view and enjoy. We think it's fitting that our library, our state's custodian of original sources, now reveals its original. And the age of the hall is tangible, and the marks made by people over its 160-year history are visible. And just touching on some of the technical aspects, this cutaway section shows how we actually created a new translucent roof over the whole hall and threaded the new services in the space created between the old and the new skin. The air handling system is the patented Bauer system, which is a very quiet, low velocity system, saving around 30% on energy consumption. So now one of Melbourne's great rooms is future-proof for the next century, returned to the public for our use and enjoyment. And that's the end of the tour. And the great news is that the library is open. So check out their website for the current times and protocols. And I really hope you can go to the library and enjoy the redevelopment. Tim has asked me to finish on a slide showing a building in Melbourne that I admire. And I'm sure I'm not the first to put this one up. It's the beautiful National Gallery of Victoria by Sir Roy Grounds, officially opened in 1968. I've known this building most of my life, spending a lot of time there in my final year of school, basically memorising the Australian collection. That was part of the final exam in those days. And I think once you get to know a piece of art, it becomes a bit like a friend and you enjoy seeing it again. And each time you do see it, you learn a little bit more. It reveals something more to you. I admire this building's strength. It's quite singular in the way it addresses the street. But at the same time, it's proved to be endlessly adaptable, hosting new worlds and new experiences for Melbourne at regular rotation. And I love the way those exhibition worlds get to peek out onto the facade and into the forecourt to tell us what they're about. I feel like this building has the ability to warmly accept these temporary bits while still maintaining its gravitas. This building accepts intervention, but remains in its purest form in my mind and is much loved. Thank you.
I'm Jeff Copolov, Director of Interior Design at Bait Smart. Bait Smart were responsible for both the architecture and the interiors of the club stand for the Victoria Racing Club, and this presentation focuses on the interiors. We were involved in that part of the process from day one of our appointment. Our site was that of the old members' stand from 1924. Significant structural issues, poor outlook, traditional one-way orientation, and outdated and substandard members' facilities meant that the stand from 1924 was beyond its use-by date. Our brief, in the words of Amanda Elliott, the first female chairman of the VRC and our very hands-on client, was for us to create a symbolic building, a building that celebrated the rich heritage of the club, that exemplified the future and changed the member and guest race day experience forever. But what does it take to do that? And this graph here, over 7 years, graphs Bait Smart's input in hours over time. Our first design pitch prior to our formal appointment was in 2012. And you can see within the graph that there was a lead up of input up to the point of design development and contract documentation administration with its largest input. There was a hiatus period for about a year through 15 and 16, and then we had a very fixed construction period of 20 months, commencing immediately with demolition on the completion of the 2000 Spring Racing Carnival. We had a drop-dead date deadline to open by Carnival of 2018. This process took 55,000 hours work by over 101 Bait Smart staff, and that would be equivalent to 30 years for one person. So it gives some idea of the amount of input. Some key facts and figures, well, we were catering for 30,000 potential members. The building is 18,000 square metres, over 101 metres long, 30 metres high, 14 food and beverage outlets over 5 levels. Some of the key design pillars. Well, it was important that we reflected the heritage of the VRC. In fact, the VRC's history tracks that of colonial settlement in Victoria. The club also reflects social and architectural mores of the time, with many different buildings during that period. Interestingly, Bait Smart's own history runs for a similar period as we were established in 1852. So for us, it was a great honour to work on this, one of Melbourne's iconic institutions. Other key pillars were, of course, creating facilities for the members. We wanted to broaden the base and promote great social interaction for all to enjoy, a much more permeable and transparent facility. The race day experience was fundamental. This is in fact a building to house a spectacle. We wanted good access. We wanted to be able to hear, see and smell the race. Good 270-degree views all around the building, with 360 degrees of circulation as opposed to the old building. We wanted to create a much more enhanced, dynamic and lively sporting experience with great connection both inside and out. Fashion has always been a fundamental part of the race day experience. And in fact, the history of the club also tracks the history of fashion since settlement. Their own archives and images record the history of fashion are now well and truly integrated into the new club stand with photography and painting. Racing is a social and special event occasion, and people love to dress up, a place to see and be seen. And what we wanted to do was create a stand that enhanced that experience and the sense of display. Gardens are also well known to be a great part of Flemington's spring racing experience, and garden and flower beds have been integrated into the building with a wonderful rooftop garden and planter tubs winding their way up through and physically into the building. Some of our key design architectural principles were to create a simple all-white building, a building that was memorable and iconic, that was celebratory, joyful and uplifting, a building that could be read in the round, and very much a neutral shell, allowing people and the venues within to be the focus. Some of our early study models shown here in sketches show some of those principles: the strong horizontal layers, the connection of the interiors both inside and out to the terrace seating, simple white ceiling forms that flowed inside and out, allowing these uninterrupted views with incredibly innovative floor-to-ceiling frameless glass, which in part at key points were curved so that sight lines were not interrupted by mullions. A very open and transparent building, and a highly technically enabled building that allowed service and technology to be seamless from within. And here you see the completed building, which is very much a platform for people, but also an incredible backdrop for the horses, and a shot here in 2018 of the champion Winx. And our siting, you see the site plan in the round. To the north, a strong connection with its main entrance and betting ring with its bookmakers. To the south, the stand spills out onto the members' lawn, the mounting yard, and the cross view to the finishing line. To the east, there's a bridge allowing members to connect and overlook the parade ring. And to the west, a bridge connects to the adjacent grandstand and to the nearby committee room. This drawing shows in cross-section the overall building of its 5 levels. You can see how it tapers back from the track, allowing wonderful views by a series of layers. To the north side, a much more vertical disposition, and through the centre, over 3 levels, a void with its sweeping grand staircase connecting 3 levels of the stand for connectivity. The top floor is the rooftop garden with its rooftop bar. And some of our planning principles, possibly best shown here on level 1 in beige. The overall circulation is defined not only within all the way around the building, but outside through terraces. One is able to circumnavigate and spill down onto the seating plats and down onto the lawn. A central circulation zone primarily splits the plan into 2 halves. Shown here in blue, our vertical circulation consists of not only the grand void and its sweeping staircase dead centre, but concealed escalators, escape stairs and lifts to give us full vertical connection through the building. Also shown in the deeper core part of the plan are the toilet amenities, shown in green on this plan, and our large array of kitchens, almost 2 per level, are shown here in purple, again buried within the deep core of the footprint, much bigger than would be perceived as you walk around the floor plate, but absolutely seamless, and its connection imperative for a clean and operational success of the building. Shown in orange to the right, the GH Mumm champagne bar, which I'll go to in greater detail in a moment, and on the left-hand side, the other venue on this floor being the members' bar. And now, as we arrive in the building, a series of finished photographs. Dead centre on entry on the ground floor, with its slight incline, one's able to look all the way through the building from entry out to the track beyond. The strong green colour of the track and its turf is brought inside through the arrival and feature rugs and carpets custom designed for the space, the grand mark of the VRC logo embossed within that carpet. The void rising up through the full 3 floor levels features with its grand staircase, and to the left and right on this level, 2 of the members' lounges. As one looks down through the stair, you can see the way in which the staircase itself is really like a grand circular catwalk, a great place to be seen and a great place to see others. Our 2 lounges on the ground floor, symmetrical, are curated with a wonderful collection of the archive of artwork, memorabilia and paintings from the VRC's rich tradition. And that imparts a great sense of the club. In fact, above the fireplace here, you see the old drawing of the original grandstand, and those fireplaces really make the place much more welcoming on a winter's race day. Other key elements were the integration of the old stand, a nod to the past in the way in which we took the bottom 3 images show components of the old stand, the benches, the newel posts of the old staircases, which in this instance have been kept and integrated into the new courtyard bar, which is adjacent to the members' lawn. So we really wanted to celebrate and reuse some of those components which were much loved and form a strong history for members. On the ground floor also our bakery, equine themed, a great grab and go place for coffee and croissant. One of our feature venues was the Mumm Bar, And Mum for many years has been a key sponsor of the club. They've had an existing association in the old stand, but here they wanted to make a much grander and more dynamic venue. And for us, it was imperative to understand their brand so that we could create a venue that was appropriate. So a trip to France, as arranged by Mum, was essential. And of course, we were delighted to go to be immersed in their brand and to be immersed in champagne. Well, what did we learn about the brand? It's got a strong tradition of affiliation with sport. It celebrates performance, movement and speed, and has long been associated with Victoria with the Grand Prix and horse racing. This early image board shows the way in which we captured some of that exhilaration and performance. Fluid lines infused with energy, inspired sculptural forms and dynamic flows. We wanted to create an experiential journey along the 50-metre long space. And the bottom image shows one of our early sketches of how that plan might be arranged. This early study model, 3D printed, shows the built forms as 3D sculptural elements floating as a series of pavilions within the space. And we borrowed from the brand logo, the red ribbon or cordon rouge, as a key signature visual icon that flows very dynamically through the building and through the fit out, and can be seen very much as a strong visual attract from the turf below. It was an eye-catching element, and the carpet itself was a custom designed element that was in black and white, and that also expressed the sense of flow and movement like a slipstream running through the space. One of the unique aspects of champagne, and what makes it unique to other beverages, is method champenois, the way in which champagne is fermented within the bottle. And here we reinterpreted the traditional timber riddling rack as the back bar element above the wine display and champagne display, and became a key feature for those bars. And one of the things that I found most interesting when I visited the winery in France was reading a handwritten note from Napoleon to the owners of Mum at the time, where he'd written, "You need champagne to celebrate your wins, and like in horse racing, you also need it to celebrate your losses." The Members Bar. The Members Bar is another reinvention of one of the traditional bars within the old stand. It has very much a club-like atmosphere, and here we integrated much of the heritage signage and photography within that interior. The carpets were designed by us and were inspired again by fashion-related textiles, in this instance a houndstooth pattern. The old members' dining room, which was traditionally timber panelled, was reinterpreted in the new club stand as lacquered timber panels, taking many of their wonderful old heritage paintings, oil paintings, taking pride of place on those central walls. You see the flowing white ceiling making its way from inside to out, disengaged from the perimeter glass walls, with its wonderful views of the track, small circular white columns, and here our carpet was inspired by traditional tartan textiles. Straight 6 is a high-energy bistro, featuring a show kitchen and a wonderful wood-fired oven. Its rustic, earthy finishes contrast with some of the more refined finishes of the other venues, and certainly caters for the broad demographic. The Byerley, by contrast, is a fine dining restaurant, much softer and sumptuous, and a much more hushed interior, where its delicate pastel tones and floral touches reference the garden setting outside. Bluegrass, a hip cocktail bar, much more luxe and fashion-focused in its aesthetic, and here inspired by fashion designers Paul Smith's use of pattern, colour and textile. The rooftop bar takes pride of place. At its narrowest dimension, the multi-purpose venue gives wonderful views to the north and the south overlooking the track, and the outdoor terrace with its 2 outdoor bars is over 1,000 square metres, with extraordinary views along the Strait, the track and Melbourne's wonderful city skyline beyond, and also an incredible place to party. And finally, the helicopter view is fundamental and always envisaged from the start for those final shots of horses going past the finishing post. A great place for the VRC to mark its brand, but also significant in that it is, in fact, for 16 decades, it's the host of the race that stops a nation. And now to my favourite building. Well, I was told that I couldn't pick a building by our own practice, but I'm not very good at following orders, so I'm going to do that anyway. This is ICI House, designed by Bates Smart and McCutcheon in 1958. Well, why is it relevant to me? I guess it starts because of the fact that I was born the day that building was finished. And I've always been attracted to mid-century modern design. And in fact, my grandfather was an architect and has a rich collection of images that he took on the first open day for that building back in 1958. For many years, Bates Smart and Orica, now a subsidiary of ICI, have hosted open house sessions in the building, and I'm proud to be able to talk today about our building. Why is it also extraordinary? Well, we're still the architects. Orica is still in the building. The building in its time was incredibly innovative. It broke the 130-foot limit, becoming Melbourne's first skyscraper, one of the most significant first glass curtain wall buildings in Australia. It was a humanist building. Not only was its modernism in its streamlined materials, but in its interiors finish, it was very humane and Scandinavian in its overall aesthetic. It put the staff above the executives, with the staff canteen on the top floor and the executive lounge one level below. The garden of the ground plane was given back to the people of Melbourne as a place where everyone could gather. Today, planning for contemporary commercial buildings follows its principles. It has an offset core with clean, open floor plates, open to light to the north and south. From an environmental point of view, it has sun louvers to the north and solid walls to the east and west, exactly how you would plan a modern building today for environmental sensitivity. And it's been the home to Bates Smart for over 22 years. But in keeping with what I was instructed to do, my second favourite building is BHP's old headquarters at 140 William Street, designed by the wonderful Young & Freeman Architects. Thanks for listening.
Hello. I'm honoured to be doing this streaming of this series with my peers today as I present to you the recently completed Old Quad redevelopment project at the University of Melbourne. Significantly for the University, this project is the first application in Australia of the adaptive reuse model Passive House Enefit to a building of state heritage significance. I will speak more on that shortly, but first some history to provide you with the context as to why that is so important. The University of Melbourne was established in 1853, just 2 years after the founding of the colony of Victoria, and the Old Quad was its first building. Construction began in 1854 to the design of the first university architect, Francis Maloney White, making it the earliest university begun in Australia. University building begun in Australia. The Gothic Revival style demonstrates close links to the influential Oxbridge model of the period, and it was designed having a traditional quadrangle plan with cloisters. It took the university, we might note, 126 years to realise the full vision, with the final works to complete the quad actually not occurring until 1981. This is one of the few historic photos we have of the original interiors, and it's of the North Wing lecture theatres. The building started out housing teaching, research, administration, and interestingly, professorial residential apartments on the first floor of the wings, which lasted for a while, but I think they found living on top of their workplace stressful, and obviously moved out as fast as they could. It even housed the university's museum collection on the first floor of the North Wing, and here you can see a lithograph of it. We don't have photos. The collection we know is now largely with Museums Victoria, and obviously weighed a lot because in the previous photo there were columns shown which were not part of the original design and had to be put in. The use and form of the building evolved as the university grew around it. Seen here in the 1930s, you can see the traditional orientation south towards the city, town and gown, and the north annex with a central path down the centre of the now not to be walked on quadrangle, and the driveway down to the main gatehouse, which still sits on Grattan Street. This closer view of the Reed and Barnes 1875 North Annex edition, taken in the 1930s, shows the addition of skylights to the North Wing to illuminate the University Library, which had moved into the North Wing by that stage and occupied the full volume, which had resulted in the complete gutting of the original fit-out in the 1920s. So change started early in this building. The library had moved to the North Wing from the North Annex as pictured here, and much of what we see in this photo was subsequently covered by layers of infill and was something that was rediscovered as part of this project. As you can see from this evolution diagram of the North Wing, there had been much change, and this presented us with the opportunity to be both radical in approach, curatorial, and innovative in how we thought about what the project should achieve, highlighting what is original and reinterpreting where necessary to achieve a new purpose and function. Beginning with a whole building master plan in 2015, this project has reimagined the Old Quad's role on campus. It has focused on returning it to its place as the ceremonial, cultural and heritage heart of the campus. So what did we start with? A building that gives little away about what is happening inside, and only a single point of entry to the North Wing, which was going to become quite an active space within it. To the north, the building following demolition of the Scarborough Wing and University Bookroom has presence, but no physical connection to what is a very busy side of the campus. And internally, the results of all the decades of change and adaptation left an interior on the ground floor that was uninviting and quite frankly sad. But you can see once the infill was removed, 3 whole levels of it, the proportions and essential grandeur of the spaces could start to be seen again. The new steel structure that was inserted has been put back at the original ceiling floor level, and you can see the enormous volumes that had otherwise been concealed. And as we started to scrape the paint away from the walls and demolish later alterations, you can see the original stone exterior of the North Wing being revealed. In other areas, we removed ceilings, revealing previously hidden stairs, windows and details, obscured for nearly 90 years. And somewhere buried in this lecture theatre, which had been part of the arts faculty, was the library, waiting to be revealed and restored. The painted tide mark indicates where the suspended ceilings sat over bathrooms and offices, fortunately preserving the distempered wall finish above and the exposed trusses and all of the decorative details. The cast iron columns had been previously buried in terracotta partition walls and were fortunately largely intact. And in the east wing, which also formed part of the works, you can see oddities such as this fireplace, which seemingly suspended in the space, and a coffered ceiling, which is a very very unique and quite decorative design, and has no comparable example anywhere that we know of, is almost lost in the sea of fluoro lights, lighting troughs that have been added, and building services. The first floor professorial apartments, which had latterly been offices, also had secrets to yield, with elements and evidence of things like the infield scissor stair, which had originally serviced the private apartments over the teaching spaces, revealed once we started to strip back the layers. Construction in the centre of such a busy campus was not easy. The new north opening was the only way for the builder to get most of the materials in and out of the building, and as you can imagine, presented all sorts of logistical challenges for them. And there are other interesting elements that we found, such as this piece of linoleum buried under a wall in the library, which has then allowed us to change the design of the carpets that we were putting back in the spaces so that we were more accurately reflecting the sort of decorative detail that had been there originally. And now to turn to Passive House. Passive House originated in Northern Europe in the late 1980s and is a technical means of reducing energy use in buildings. The model can be applied to all building types and in any context, not just houses, as perhaps the title suggests. It relies on an understanding of how buildings are constructed and incorporates all the fabric of a building in the service of energy reduction. The emphasis is on ensuring that building fabric performs to the highest standards of airtightness and thermal insulation. If these objectives are achieved, building services can be simplified and reduced, which in the case of the old quad was an essential outcome. Passive house principles have been applied widely in new build construction throughout Europe and other places, and certainly also to existing buildings there, including heritage assets. For us, we had long been frustrated by the seeming gap between sustainability and heritage as it had been practiced locally, and have found in Passive House that the technical exactitude, evidence-based and fabric-first approach principles are a comfortable alignment with our design philosophy and approach as architects. The implementation of Passive House benefit principles alongside Green Star targets provides an evidence-based method for achieving a comfortable temperature all year round and reducing energy consumption by 70% or higher. For Old Quad, an internal compartmental approach was taken, treating the north wing and the north annex as separate thermal and airtight envelopes. Removing thermal breaks was essential. With limited space in the building for mechanical plant and infrastructure, limited just simply to the roof space, it was essential we reduced plant size. The existing building was considered impossible to heat or cool and rated poorly amongst staff and users for comfort. With new variable flow air conditioning systems delivered from the floor, so only conditioning the occupied space of the high volume rooms, with high efficiency heat exchange cores, we have a result for a building that achieves high energy efficiencies that are measurable and a spatial experience that, most importantly, is comfortable. Insulation was introduced to walls, floors and ceilings, and you can see here the progress of zip panel installation to the walls underway, already installed to the ceiling and the floor. With airtightness barriers to the inner face, the new inner walls are separated from the original by an air gap, which you can see in this image, and it simply creates an insulated box. In the east wing, where more of the original decorative details such as architraves, skirtings and cornices were existed, we applied insulated plasterboard to the internal face of just the external walls. So doing as much as we could to increase the insulation of the building, but trying to do it in a more sensitive way. The image on the right shows the finished works. So you can see that the additional insulation sits there as a floating layer that is reversible if it's desired. It's discernible. It's not trying to hide, but equally it has an essential improvement to the operation of the building. We took the same approach in the library, with insulation packed into the ceiling and insulated plasterboard to the walls with an air tightness wrap over. These photos show that as a work in progress, with services penetration still to be sealed. And blower door tests were undertaken at critical stages to test the air tightness integrity, which allows you a progressive process of actually going around and sealing defects before you finish. And so what does it look like as the finished building delivered for occupation? The new Treasury space on the ground floor is a permanent exhibition space where the university can publicly display its cultural collection and research. And this is the initial installation, but expecting that will constantly evolve and change. That space is flanked to the east and west by bay rooms, which reinstate the original professorial teaching spaces, but now used for meetings and engagement. The East Bay houses the original council furniture designed by Joseph Reed in 1864, which has been meticulously restored. University Hall occupies the first floor, again flanked by bay rooms to the east and the west, acknowledging the original plan of the buildings by the insertion of the bay room walls. And the original steel frame windows were refurbished with a secondary layer of high performance windows to the inner skin as part of the passive house envelope. The bay rooms, this is a closer detail of the bay rooms on the first floor, showing the lining with the American walnut panelling and the European oak parquetry floor. The panelling design is being derived from other elements, existing design elements in the building. A new stair and a lift, which is behind to the rear of the photographer when taking this photograph, the stair floats free of the wall, allowing the palimpsest so that you can read the history in the revealed north wall of the north wing, with scars and the shadows of previous stairs and doorways and openings now revealed for people to actually read the changes that have happened to the building. And while I wouldn't ordinarily for open house take you on a tour of bathrooms or commercial kitchens, in this instance, these have been inserted into the spaces where bathrooms originally were, and it's allowed us to actually insert services. You can see with the suspended ceiling in these spaces that we've actually had the opportunity to cram in the necessary plant. And it's also, should be said, that big event spaces can't operate without these essential amenities. And here's the library restored on the first floor of the North Annex, with all of the decorative detail conserved, refurbished and brought back to its full grandeur, and now used as a major event space by the university. The North Annex and our new entry from the north is immediately when you come to that entry, you're greeted by this amazing stained glass screen, which is an installation designed by Tom Nicholson and stained glass artisan Jeffery Wallace, especially for this phase of the works. Called Towards a Glass Monument, it's 2 parallel screens of stained glass, each measuring over 4 metres in length and 5 metres in height, and with 6 cast bronze plaques providing context for why this piece, what this piece is about. And it has an amazingly intimate relationship with the building and has quite a story to tell. Although from the exterior not much has seemingly changed for the old quad, the interior has been transformed. And we're proud that the first step in the rebirth of this building at the heart of the campus has been achieved. And now to finish, I just want to share with you two of my favourite buildings in Melbourne. The first needs no introduction. To me, the Joseph Reed 1880s designed Royal Exhibition building represents the chutzpah and can-do attitude of marvellous Melbourne of that time. That it still operates today as a place of exhibition and retains a relevance to Melburnians across a diverse demographic underlines for me the way well-designed buildings can evolve and adapt if they have an essence that is immutable. And here's a 20th century example, which I've also had the privilege to work on, the Eggleston, MacDonald and Seacombe 1955 Bow Repair Centre at the University of Melbourne. For this, it was really a reimagining in the early 2000s of how to maintain the relevance of the building. But we found very quickly that, again, based on a clear design philosophy, based on engineering principles in this building that has an amazing clarity and rationale, we simply found that as part of the refurbishment project, we were introducing services that the architect probably had wished he'd had back in the 1950s and seemed to align beautifully with what this amazing building still has. Thank you.